All right. So the question is what is the role of business in the fight against global poverty? I think that this is a really intriguing question. I think that this is such an intriguing question that I have spent the last about 7 years of my life really pursuing this question and trying to answer it. That is actually a picture of me in Kenya, in Kibera, which is one of the largest slums in all of Africa. And I think it competes as one of the largest slums in all of the world, trying to get at this particular question. Why is this intriguing? Well, one of the reasons why this is an especially intriguing question is because just recently, up until about 10 years ago, this question about what to do about global poverty has always fallen in the domain of governments, nonprofits, NGOs, always asking the question, how can we fix this particular problem? Just in the last 10 years or so, 10 years ago or so, some of the researchers in the business schools and a lot of the managers in some of the world's leading businesses started to get together and say, all right, governments and NGOs have been looking at this problem. Now it's time for business to start looking at this problem because business can actually do a lot of things to help the poor. And it makes a lot of sense because business has a lot of things that these other organizations, governments, NGOs, nonprofits, that a lot of them don't have because they're subject to the forces of market competition and and trying to fight against other organizations. There's a lot of things like they're more efficient, they more innovative, they have access to unlimited sources of money. If you have a good idea, then investors are going to invest in your business, and you can get the money to do that. And so they said, so look, and some of these researchers even said, I love this quote because it's one researcher that actually made the comment that governments and NGOs have faltered in their efforts to help the poor. And now business is stepping up to the plate to tackle some of the world's thorniest problems, like poverty. And they bring out a lot of these examples of various things that businesses have been able to solve, a lot of the problems associated with poverty that business has been able to solve. One of the examples, I'm just going to highlight just a few of these that are on here. So Procter & Gamble has developed a water filtration system. One of the problems that the poor have is that the water that they drink is not pure. It causes a lot of diseases, but they can't really afford expensive systems because they're very poor. So Procter & Gamble has developed a system that's very cheap, and now these people can drink clean water. I like the car over here. That's a $2,000 car that Tata Motors has developed. They can build and sell a car for $2,000 to poor people. There's several other things. Cell phones that are sold to poor people. Solar ovens down there on the left. Nike has developed sneakers. Fair & Lovely is a skin cream that women can use to lighten their skin. Coca-Cola, M-Pesa, which allows poor people to transfer money through their cell phones. And then I have on there, Grameen Phone has developed an internet connection, and you can use these for all kinds of things. Like farmers can use it to check and see what the prevailing prices are for the things that they produce, so that then they don't get ripped off when they go and sell it to brokers and those kinds of things. And so this view basically argues, look at all this innovation. Because business can do this, business is the solution to poverty. It's time for governments, it's time for NGOs to step out of the way and let business step in and solve these problems once and for all. Well, so this became a very popular movement, and a lot of research and a lot of people started working on this idea, started bringing up a lot of examples and things like that. And then another group started coming in and saying, well, hold on one second. Business is not the solution to poverty. Not only is business not the solution to poverty, business actually hurts the poor. It makes them worse off than they were before. And again, this group brings up their examples, and I've just put some of them up here on the screen too. So up in the right-hand corner, Vikram Makula was the CEO of a microfinance lender, and you can see the fallout in the pictures on the other side. Some people accuse him of causing his borrowers to commit suicide because his organization he would have lenders that would go out and would use these coercive lending tactics to get people to borrow more money than they could afford at very high interest rates. And then when they couldn't pay their money back, the lenders would coerce them to the point where the only way that they saw that they could get out was by committing suicide. Huge protests going on in India because of this. I mentioned in the last screen, and I find this really interesting, in the bottom right-hand corner is the case of Fair & Lovely skin cream. In the previous screen, I said that these researchers who look at business as the solution to poverty often cite this particular company because they're selling specifically to very poor women. Just in the last few years, some people have come out and said, well, hold on one second, let's look at what this company actually does. They sell a skin lightening lotion, a skin lightening cream. And if you look at the advertisements, what they're doing is they're actually selling to poor women who have dark skin in countries where dark skin is not valued. India and Bangladesh and places like that. And you'll actually see, I've seen some of the advertisements that they've run. You can see one of them here. They show this woman, and over on the left-hand side, she has dark skin, and she's very sad, and she doesn't like life, and she hates it. And then she starts putting the cream on, and as she starts applying the cream, not only does her skin get lighter, but she becomes happier, and life has more value in it now because she has this lighter skin. Some of the commercials that they've run, too, like show a woman with dark skin, and her father can't marry her off because of her dark skin, and she goes in to apply for a job, and the employer won't look at her because she has the dark skin, and she just doesn't know what to do. She's in total despair until she starts using the Fair & Lovely skin cream, and then she goes back to the same employer, and he doesn't even recognize her. But now, because she has the fair skin, he gives her the job. People look at that and say, that's horrible. This is not something that's helping the poor. This is something that's reinforcing a stereotype. And so, you know, there's really very few cases where you can say that business has actually been helping the poor. So the question that I've been looking at is, who is right? And I put this diagram up, and I think some of you have already seen this a couple of times. You know, this is kind of the debate that's out there. Who is right? Is it those that say that business is helping the poor, or is it those that say that business is a part of the problem? And you can see a few of the examples here. So firm one, you know, which one is it? What is business? How would we define business? Firm one has a huge social benefit and makes a little bit of profit. Firm two makes a lot of profit but has very little social benefit. Firm three makes a lot of profit but actually hurts people. And firm four is actually this ideal that, that these researchers are saying. This is what they're saying, is that by doing business, these firms will both make money and do a lot of social good. Well, which of these, how do you define business? What is business? And this debate has been raging on and on and on and on. And so I decided to enter into the argument. But one thing that I looked at when I saw this debate, and one thing that I noticed, is that most of the research that's come out on one side of the argument or the other has been based on cases. You know, and you can do that like all day long. I can bring up a case of a company that has done amazing things to help the poor. And then you can bring up a case of a company that has absolutely destroyed the self-esteem of some poor woman because she has dark skin. And then I can bring up another case of another company that's helping people because they're selling them solar ovens. And you can just go back and forth and back and forth. And in my opinion, that's a fight that can never be won. And the way to kind of look at this, the shift that I have tried to make in this debate over the role of business in fighting poverty is these are the two sides. I guess I kind of got them backwards. It should be the congruence on the left. Anyway, there's the side that says that by doing good things and helping the poor, you're going to make a lot of money. There's the side that says that's total baloney. You can't make a lot of money by doing good things for the poor. The reason why is because you know, once you have to make a decision between profits and your social mission, profits have to win because you have investors. They control the puppet strings. Now, as an academic, what I did is I kind of looked at this and I said, well, the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle, as it often does. And instead of framing the question as, does business help the poor, or does business not help the poor, maybe let's start looking at the bottom, the partial overlap. under what conditions does business help the poor? And then let's start focusing and saying, well, maybe we can target business to those specific locations and not at the, in the areas where it doesn't, or where economic profits and the social mission are separate. So it is a little bit of a change in a paradigm from whether to when and under what conditions. Now, once you do that, what you have to start doing is you have to start applying rigorous research methods. You have to start putting in theory that will start defining boundary conditions. And so that's exactly what I've been trying to do for the last few years, is to start using theory and research. And there actually is a group of researchers that have started to do this. Most of them are economists. One of them has given a pretty good TED Talk herself. Her name is Esther Duflo, who's really working to apply. Let's stop telling stories and start actually doing the research and finding out what the real answers are. So that's what I'm trying to do, is starting to look at it from a researcher's perspective, objectively. Take the passion out of it and look at it and see what the numbers and the theories actually say. So how am I going about doing this? Well, I do my research in the industry of microfinance. I mentioned microfinance earlier because microfinance has come under a lot of fire recently. Microfinance, for those of you who don't know, I think most of you are aware what microfinance is. These are these lending organizations in developing countries that give really, really small loans, $70, $80, $90, to very poor, usually to very poor entrepreneurs, who will then use these loans to buy fish or apples or hair cutting supplies or tools to make furniture in their house or a sewing machine, these kinds of things. And they use that to make money, then they pay the loan back. The organization, the lending organization, makes a lot of money, and the poor people are able to pull themselves out of poverty. I'm not going to go into the exact detail. They came up with a very innovative business model to do that. I'm not going to go into the details of what the business model actually is, but this is an innovative industry that has figured out how to give very small loans to poor people. And the reason why I picked microfinance to look at is there's really a few reasons. First of all, this is an enormous industry, and it has just completely exploded over the last several years. You can see in this graph that just in the last decade, it's grown from about 7 or 8 million borrowers around the world to where now there's well over 100, pushing 120 million registered borrowers. We don't know how many unregistered borrowers there are. These are officially registered borrowers of microfinance. So it's a very large industry, and it's also very profitable. This graphic is from about 6 or 7 years ago. It was put up on The Economist magazine, actually looked at microfinance to see how profitable they were. And they found that a lot of these microfinance organizations are making more money than Citigroup. You can see they show the return on equity of all these organizations. The #1 organization is Compartamos, which is making a return on equity of almost 50%, which is outrageous. That's a huge amount of money. Citigroup, which at the time, now Citigroup, in the last 3 or 4 years, Citigroup has really kind of stumbled a little bit. But at the time, Citigroup was considered the most profitable of the traditional banks. And yet these microfinance organizations were leaving them in the dust. So there was a few questions that I started asking about microfinance. I said, this looks like a perfect industry where I can start looking at this question of not do these organizations help the poor, but when do these organizations help the poor? And the first thing that I looked at was basically, I made this map up specifically for this presentation, but I was looking at similar data. And I said, if microfinance was really helping the poorest of the poor, then what we would see is we would see a map where the countries that had the poorest people were also the countries that had the most microfinance. And that's not exactly what we're seeing. If you look at this map, what I've done here is I've gone in and I've colored the countries that are the poorest in blue. These are the countries that have the lowest GDP per capita, the 20 countries that have the lowest GDP per capita of any countries in the world. Then what I did is I went in and I said, I colored the countries that have the largest microfinance sectors, and I divided the total number of borrowers by the population of the country to get to that. So you can compare countries like China and India to countries like Panama. And I said, which ones have the most vibrant microfinance sectors. And they weren't the same countries. Now, the countries that have microfinance, these are definitely very, very poor countries relative to Canada or the United States or Western Europe. But these are not the poorest of the poorest countries. These are countries like Mexico and Peru and India. Kenya is a pretty poor country, but again, it's not the poorest of the poor, and in fact, there was no overlap. Commercial microfinance was in no countries that were the absolute poorest. And so I looked at it and I said, well, then there has to be something else that explains what microfinance. Poverty actually did end up explaining a lot of where microfinance went, but there had to be something else in there. And I said, if I can figure out what this is, then this will start to explain a little bit about when and under what conditions can business help the poor. Because what this shows is that you can't run a microfinance business in every country. Now before I get to the punchline of this particular study, because I found my answer, I want to just look at the other study. This study was designed to look at the business case. Where is microfinance finding a large enough market in order to sustain an industry, basically? And I'm finding that it's not in the poorest countries. The second research question that I looked at, and again, like I said, I'm going to hold off on the punchline because the answer to both of these questions was the same. And basically the answer to when and under what conditions does business help the poor is going to be the same across both of these studies. So a second study that I looked at, I went to India because in India, first of all, India has a very, very large and very vibrant commercial microfinance sector. But just in the last year and a half or so, what started happening, and I already mentioned this, what started happening is a lot of the borrowers started committing suicide. A lot. I mean, this is like 50 people, but still, I mean, that's a significant number. And people started looking at it, and they started saying, well, it's not just the people that are committing suicide, it's the people that are, feeling psychologically trapped by these microfinance lenders. What is microfinance doing that's causing people to commit suicide that's probably hurting a lot more of their customers? And so the question on this is when is microfinance actually helping people versus when is microfinance hurting people? And so they're kind of similar. The first one is, where does microfinance work as a business? This one is, where does microfinance actually provide some kind of social good? And like I said, the answer to both questions, this was something that I actually found very interesting. I found that microfinance works the best in both creating a market and in helping the poor in countries that have relatively good governments, relatively good states. That was the answer to that map, is that these were poor countries, not the poorest, but poor countries that had relatively good governments. Mexico and Peru and Mongolia and India and those kinds of places, they had relatively better governments than a lot of the countries that didn't have microfinance. And so what my research is showing is that business can be an effective tool in fighting poverty, but unlike what a lot of these researchers were saying, they're saying that business will replace these government programs. What I actually found is that business works the best in the fight against poverty when businesses and governments and NGOs and all these actors actually start coming together and working together. Now, in countries where that can't happen because the government just doesn't work, then maybe business isn't the solution. So let's start targeting business as a solution to poverty to those places where we know it's going to work. These places where the government is actually going to A, get involved, and B, do more good than screw up what's going on there. It's that combination of government and business working together. So basically just the punchline, the conclusion is business an effective tool for fighting poverty? The answer to that is yes, but business is one tool in the toolbox. There are other tools that are out there. Instead of coming out and just saying business is this silver bullet that's now going to solve all of the world's problems, what we need to start saying is well, maybe business is like a hammer, but there's also screwdrivers and there's wrenches, and let's only use the hammer when it's most appropriate to use the hammer. Thank you very much.